Okay, hello. Hi. Yeah, we're really happy to be here today. We're at Republica for the very first time, and that's also one topic that we'll be talking about. It's the afternoon, you don't have enough coffee, you've picked a long slot where you can kind of have a bit of a come down, where it's like a legal judicial tutorial where we will cover all the legal developments of the last few years. Dr. Jessica has researched this topic for 5 years, and she wrote her dissertation about it, so she knows everything about it. And that's what we will hear in the next 60 minutes. Well, yeah, so we are lawyers, and as lawyers, we love laws. And there are many really, really beautiful laws. There's the DSA, the GDPR, the DDG, many amazing abbreviations for great laws. But a beautiful law is not enough if you just lean back and don't do anything afterwards and don't do anything else anymore. And if you just don't start by writing a law in the first place. But the regulation of social media is like a white potato and hot potato, and nobody likes to touch it. Jessica, but I don't know if people slept enough last night, and we need to tell stories. And we could, or maybe just the highlights. And I would like to start with a story, because exactly 10 years ago, this lady was in Berlin at a refugee accommodation, and there was a man called Hannes Modamani, who later became my client, who had just come from Syria, mostly on foot, and was in this refugee accommodation and saw that there was like a huge commotion, lots of security, and decided, there must be someone who's important. He had no idea who that was, but she looked nice. And so he took a selfie with her, and the picture of this selfie went around the world. It was a symbol for welcoming culture, but it triggered some people really intensely. And Modamani, who had also shared this picture on his Facebook, suddenly found himself in every piece of fake news whenever there was anything that happened related to refugees. Then it must have been not just anyone, but it must have been the Merkel refugee bomb attack on the airport in Brussels, or a lorry at a German Christmas market. All of those happened that year. And immediately it was always, it wasn't just any refugee, but it must have been the Merkel refugee. So unpleasant, both for Merkel, but even more so for Hannes Modamani. He said he didn't even dare going out on the street anymore. He was worried about being recognized as a terrorist. He only went out with his head and face covered. Not very easy, because he works where Markus Söder also works. Well, yeah, he works at McDonald's at the counter, where it's difficult to avoid contact with customers. But Hannes Modamani was one of the very few victims of hate speech online who was willing to do something against that, because it was already too late and it just kept getting worse. Because Facebook, in response to all of these reports, said, great, thank you for reporting this to us. Our platform gets better that way, and we've checked, and we see no reason to remove this post. That was the modus operandi back then, and even today there was some things were slightly different in between, but that's how they react when you report fake news. And essentially, Angela Merkel, she's kind of the beginning of regulation. We're celebrating a 10-year anniversary. Oh, party. But that's actually already that was already the best and happiest part of this presentation, because you've already heard about many other things from Markus earlier, so we can remove those from the presentation. But the good news, the one piece of good news, is that we know more today about what really threatens freedom of speech. Because when Hannes Modamani sued Facebook 10 years ago with us, it became clear that our laws are not enough and that we need other laws. And then at the time, Heiko Maas, the Minister of Justice, already had a draft law in his drawer that primarily demanded a duty for transparency. That's what politicians do when they don't know what else to do, because if you just need to be transparent but do nothing else, then, well. And so based on this lawsuit, Heiko Maas, the Minister of Justice, dared to turn the implement the enforcement law, the Internet Network Enforcement Law, the NetzDG, and so Merkel became the mother of regulation along with Hannes Modamani. And at the time, I was relieved and hoped that things would improve. And there was a huge reaction in civil society. On the one hand, there were people who profited from hate speech, and for example, like the right-wing politician Beatrice von Storch said, you can't tell us what to say. But even civil society was skeptical about the state telling us what to say, and there were worries that there would be over-blocking, because that platforms would be so restricted by the state that they would be blocking and removing way too much. And today we know over-blocking is an issue, but it didn't happen because of the network enforcement law, but it happens because of decisions made by people like this guy. Over-blocking happens because power is in the hands of tech billionaires who, for one reason or another, prefer one opinion over the other. They just don't delete things. They can make things visible or invisible. And, well, the good news is supposed to be that today at Republica 2025, we know that freedom of speech is not threatened by these over here, the politicians, but threatened more by these over there. So yeah, the state doing things is good. So today we know more. We know that freedom of speech is genuinely under threat. So I'll spoiler the result. And the regulations we have are not enough. They don't work. The laws that were passed, the DSA, the Digital Services Act, it was made pretty and put on a pedestal. And we let them convince us. We said, so beautiful, this beautiful law. But then nothing else happened. Nothing else happened after this law was passed. And now the government is just a user. It is essentially made itself into a tiny user who is begging Elon for attention and reach on Twitter. But we're not really asserting ourselves vis-a-vis the platforms. And that's in times of where, like back in the day, it was maybe a fearful, a dystopian nightmare that a platform might influence the formation of political opinion, that it might influence the posts it shows us, that ultimately in the end we might only see what they want us to see. That's not just a nightmare or a theoretical fear we have, but that's just every day. That's just regular behavior. The platforms openly say this. They say, we are the government, we decide what you see. And we see this on a very practical level. Today, for example, if you create a new empty account on Twitter, completely new, you like every party, then you see 78% AfD, right-wing AfD content on that account's timeline. That's in no proportion, completely disproportionate compared to how many people vote for this party and how much content this party posts. But it might be related to the fact that this content is especially polarizing, that it ignores the individual right to human dignity, that it leads to interaction, because it makes economic sense and it's profitable. But I actually don't care why it is 78% AfD content on that timeline. I just know that that's wrong. That can't be. That destroys our democracy. Yeah, so that's the thing that scares me. 78%. So when young people use social media and they stop watching dog and cat videos and they start consuming political content, and they see 78% pro-AfD content, far-right content, far-right positions, and they have to assume that's normal, regardless of how much, how competent they are when it comes to dealing with media. And that's just not reality. And I'm really concerned what becomes of this country and what will become of this country and the people who are important to me. Some people might say, don't complain about that so much. It's not a big deal. You have to be able to deal with debates and discussion. But what we're seeing today is that these narratives, these stories, these convictions, that not all people are supposed to belong to our people, that these views become more and more mainstream. Last year, I was really scared when I heard from Korrektiv, a German investigative journalism outlet, how even across party lines, the idea of remigration, quote unquote, had become more and more acceptable through social media. So it's really not just about individual people, but it's about our democracy. And I mean, that might be self-interested, even because I obviously have a migration background myself. Even though I have learned to speak German, I feel affected and am worried. And so I'd like to just do a very short exercise with all of you. So I would like to, those who can, I would like, could you just get up real quick? Wow, look, Jesse, they're really doing that. Look all the way in the back. You see many people who are turning, looking towards their back. If some of you stay seated, that's totally fine. And you can also sit down at the wrong time or whatever in the interest of data protection. But I would like those who have a non-German passport, please sit down now if you have a non-German passport. All foreigners sit down. Jesse, you? But you don't... Well, yeah, I have a second passport, so that's already quite a few. And so now I would like those to sit down where one parent, father or mother, as far as they know, was not born in Germany or did not have the German citizenship at the time of birth. So that's already the first group of people who are candidates for remigration. So now please sit down if you just want to sit down, but especially the ones who haven't just voted for patriotic parties and will not just be voting for patriotic parties, and who is now ashamed of still being, remaining standing, you can also sit down. So if we spread a narrative on social media, Jesse, you can also get back up, that it's a legitimate goal to target people based on their religion or their background or their political opinion, to remove them from this country, then that's an attack on the human right to dignity. And some people might say, well, the right to dignity. So I also give you the arguments for that. So, because you like this idea of human dignity that seems very abstract, and you might ask, oh, what does that mean? What does human dignity mean? And so the German Constitutional Court says the human dignity is violated when a human is the person is turned into an object of government action. That means the depersonification happens when you are not being seen as a person anymore, an individual as the individual you are, what you're doing, but as part of a group, that you're being seen based on who your parents are, what the color of your skin is. And when the goal is to get rid of those people as part of a so-called voluntary remigration. We haven't even said deportation yet, but these are the narratives. And I'm sorry for taking this detour, but all of these topics and questions are related to each other, because when someone decides that this content should be spread particularly strongly and strengthened and pushed on social media, and because of that, friends of the law, we can talk about many questions such as car tariffs, but our basic rights, human dignity, is not non-negotiable.
Basic law is a great thing. The Constitution protects us. We can lean back and revel in the knowledge that human dignity is intangible, and it is the purpose of the state to protect it. So we shouldn't worry, right? Yeah, but that's just on paper. You can't protect it yourself. Yeah, the basic law, the Constitution is made of paper. And, well, the fathers and the few mothers of the Constitution assumed that courts would always verify what happened. So the Constitution should be applicable. So you can ask yourself, okay, we've had it for 76 years. And human dignity, well, it's a bit different than what Americans have. Freedom of speech, right to bear arms, shouldn't we adopt that? Do we have space for national laws? Shouldn't we take ourselves back a bit? No, Constitution needs enforcement by a state, and that is called regulation. So we are fighting for the Constitution. We have started fighting almost 10 years ago with the Netzdigi law, the Network Enforcement Act, which was a German law and worked phenomenally. It had a huge momentum. It was great because for the first time someone dared to oppose those platforms and really make a difference. But then, in terms of implementation, it was quite a disappointment because there was hardly any fines, and if there were, they were focused on Facebook and their reporting duties. And reporting duties are important, I understand that, but there's more important things. There was something about a registration system where you can report right-wing extremist content, and this illegal content would have to be deleted. So those were some great measures for the year 2017, and the platforms they weren't really interested in that. And then we thought, okay, well, the Network Enforcement Act, it had a few gaps, a few difficulties. When stuff was deleted that shouldn't have been deleted, there was no possibility to take action against that. And it was just Germany, just one country, that wanted the platforms to stick to our laws. So maybe it was too much. We took on too big of a challenge, and we weren't able to meet it. And then, oh yeah, in comes the EU. Now, this is the part where I do this. So the EU is that's a view.
Well, yes, the EU, the white knight, who's imposing all these new duties and obligations on the platforms, and we thought, oh, well, yes, if the European Commission is sitting down there and says, oh, Musk, you need to follow our laws, then it will be fine. Well, I guess that could be considered an insult. The DSA was well-intentioned, and we were always asked, oh, what do you think about the DSA? And we said, well, in principle, it's great. And we really had great hopes, and we really have to be self-critical here. And we have been on this for 10 years, and been saying for 10 years that the government needs to regulate. Is there? Oh, yeah, there's someone from the German Parliament's Commission on Digital Issues. In the audience. And, well, the legislator recognized the issue and brought it to the European level. But then, Jessica, why did it not work on the European level? In the first instance, it worked. So the announcement by Thierry Breton, the EU commissioner, that this law would happen, that there would be all these fines, that made Musk really, really angry. He hated that he insulted Thierry Breton, and then he was pulled away from this issue. So you're saying Breton was fired because Musk didn't like him and so didn't keep going? I don't know, but at least he wasn't there anymore. And then suddenly it got very quiet around the DSA. Of course, they did things, but there wasn't this tough talk about enforcement anymore. And that's what we mean when we talk about kind of performative regulation. And then we say, oh, we have regulation, let's wait and let's see. And so there's the Network Enforcement Act, and so we wait to see if anything happens in the DSA, and then we wait 1 or 2 years, we're waiting to see what happens, and we're still waiting, and still nothing has happened. And I think that the issue with Thierry Breton was probably not the main reason that nothing happened afterwards, but I do think that it's part of the story, that everyone who touches this law, who touches this topic, is attacked, personally attacked. The government institutions are personally attacked. It's a hot potato that nobody, That's why we didn't have mics that we have to hold ourselves. That's why nobody wants to take care of this. So if you want to become politician at some point, don't do digital policy. You can only lose. And at the very least, definitely not something that could be in conflict with freedom of speech, because you don't just have the haters opposing you, but maybe also all the other people who are concerned justifiably about civil liberties. And because of that, it was a law that wasn't very popular. But we're realizing today this potato isn't actually hot. I was actually, to prove that, I threw the potato to my wife. We can hand it around, and maybe you can touch it and test if it is really hot. I mean, I guess you won't learn a lot from that, but I'll be really curious what comes of that in the end. Yeah, but in reality, oversight institutions are really not taking care of these issues. We know a user who went to the German network agency and reported more than 300 incidents of far-right posts. And the German network agency is technically responsible for instances where platforms like Twitter or Facebook are not in compliance with the DSA. And it's like their job to look into these cases and then ensure that the platforms comply with the law or have to pay a fine. That was the idea. The user does not have many options to really enforce their rights, and so the idea with the DSA was that the user essentially takes a detour via the national relevant institution and like the digital rights commissioner. And we were like, oh, great. In the past, it was the Ministry of Justice. That was not ideal. And now we have a huge agency, very competent, lots of knowledge. And we told all of our clients, if you see illegal content, just like report it to the commission, and they'll enforce, and then the commission will enforce a 6% fine against Elon. But these 300 cases were just lying there. The user kept following up. So, hey, what's happening with my reports? Have you started looking into them? Has anything come of that? Then was never any reaction. And so now he submitted a GDPR request because he was like, I want to know what happened with my data, with the cases that I submitted to them. And in response to that, the national network agency was like, oh, you sent so many requests. I will forward those to Ireland, where Facebook is based. So basically, in the May of this year, these complaints that have been, they've been receiving since May, June last year, that they were just lying around. Well, at the very least, they said nothing else. When they were asked what was happening, what was going on, that's what they said. Yeah, so that was the response, and we passed that on. And so, of course, we asked the German National Network Agency, Federal Network Agency, and so then on Friday we asked the press office, and we said, well, it looks kind of weird. It looks like you don't want to or you can't. And they were like, no. It's we can't. It's not that we don't want to do anything. It's that we can't. And Markus Beckedahl also spoke about this, and they wanted 99 positions, 99 people that they can hire, and they got 15, and then a couple of others they got from other agencies, and they said, we simply can't. We cannot even take care of every single report. We cannot even look at everything that we receive by email. So for now, we just don't do anything. And so, like, these reports from a user, they've just been lying around for over a year. Why would anyone think that 22 people are enough to check every single violation of current laws being that are being committed by in Germany by all platforms? Well, that's something you can ask on the podium tomorrow. But we see the law and its enforcement are two separate issues. And you might be able to lean back and say, well, I've regulated. What else do you want? But this implementation and enforcement is a different issue. And we are just experiencing the same again with the AI Act. So Donald Trump or Elon might say, well, you might tell them, don't worry, we're just passing these laws, but we won't be implementing them or enforcing them. Just look at these beautiful laws. And that's the point where we need to be really self-critical. What have we fought for the last few years? If it's regulation that's just in the shopping window to look at and be nice.
Yeah, the state is making itself smaller than it is. Yeah, this is the basic law. I'll just lay this down here. Don't mind it. Don't trip on it. So, yeah, we'll get to the emotional part in a second. Last Friday, we learned Donald Trump set 50% tariffs on EU countries because of unfair litigation. And also he said that unfair legislation like the Digital Service Act should be reviewed. So now those who are supposed to enforce the Digital Services Act are supposed to negotiate with Donald Trump and say, dear Donald, what can we do to appease you? Or they could just be lenient in enforcing it and just close one eye or two when it's necessary. And we'll ensure that there are no passages that you don't want in there. So we just won't enforce it, but that's against the purpose of a law. So this is a real downer, but it's getting worse, right? No, it's actually getting better. So for those who are thinking of going home, we will have concrete proposals and solutions. We don't have a presentation. Sorry, we didn't have time to prepare. What do politicians do? They call for transparency, and especially transparency of algorithms. Everyone's talking about this. Angela Merkel in 2016 at the Media Day already said we need transparency. Didn't I leave out the part? Yeah, just let us use the time to talk about transparency quickly. Well, we see a problem arising. We start a working group, and I can't hear it anymore, all this transparency. What is the consequence? Why do we want platforms to explain how their algorithms work, what kind of inquiries they get, how they process them? What can we learn from that if there's no consequences? We're no longer in the stage where we can say, social media could become a problem in the future. It could promote right-wing extremist content, or it could lead to political influences. So why are we still only calling for transparency reports? Why do we question the development when the end result is the problem? It's like we have a broken car and we don't look. Well, we want to look at the motor and we want to look at the problem precisely, and well, later we say, actually, everything worked. We can't work like that. If we protest against Meta, TikTok, X, Twitter, there's always the argument from the platform operators when we say, you have to take this down. What they will say is, well, it's just the algorithms, and our algorithms are legal, and we can't enforce this. So, dear user, if you tell me exactly and which 4 million parts you have you found something illegal, you have to present them to me, because me, the poor platform, you can't tell me I should know what is happening on my platform. So they act like they're dumb. And when they say, well, the algorithm can't this and the algorithm can't that, Facebook is actually saying we don't have the technology because the meme could have been changed. We can't extract the text from the graphics. My God, we presented this in court in 2016, and that was the litigation by Renate Künast. And still, there's court proceedings aren't really effective. Yeah, we try to have lighthouse litigations, so to speak, that speak for cases that occur in the thousands, and we hoped that that would make other cases easier, because when Meta is told one time you have to delete illegal content everywhere on the platform, Meta would have to do that this way in all further instances, we thought. And that was naive, because we thought that companies would follow legislation if it was laid down by the courts. But Meta basically said, okay, we will do that for the singular instances of people who sued us, but we can't take that further. And Facebook and Meta can pay for a lot of lawyers, and so they get away with that. And that's frustrating. Yeah. Those lighthouse processes were only possible because they were funded by the civil society. So give a warm round of applause for Hate Aid, who help people fight against the big corporations. But still, it's the wrong method. If you go through all the courts, even if you do it, yeah, and that's very basic problems with the laws we have that regulate social media. We give a lot of responsibility to the individual user. We tell the user, well, yeah, we know there's a lot of hate and hate speech on social networks, but free speech needs to be maintained, and you just have to deal with it. You have to deal with seeing fake news every once and again, or hate speech or threats. It's not that bad. Deal with it. And if you speak out critically on social media, if you say something that some people might not like, and you end up with a shitstorm and you're in the middle of it, people say, well, why didn't you just keep your trap shut? Why didn't you just go with the mainstream or keep quiet? Like this Austrian doctor who, who posted on social media and got a shitstorm, and she's not with us anymore. Yeah, we're completely left alone with that. It's your personal problem if you're confronted with hate, and that can't be. And the answer is, well, if you can't deal with it, you have to learn media competence. You have to learn how to deal with that and how to deal with the fact that everything is full of fake news on the internet. You have to learn to do research, and so on and so on. Well, nothing wrong with media competence. Don't misunderstand me. But the next presentation will be on this topic, but media competence alone won't be enough. When there's so much political advertising on social media, what does it help when so many young people who are interested in politics for the first time get their info on social media? The problem is that the effect is there, even if you take it back. And even if you know that 60% of the population are not voting AfD, but still the messages stick. The emotions are there and they stick with us. So this can't be the answer to tell the individual, yeah, you have to get informed and you have to fight against fake news to solve this problem. What we actually need is the state to come in. It would be nice if we as a civil society were able to tackle this problem, but we can't do it without support by the state, even if we have good reasons to not put 100% trust into the state. We want to come to the solutions. We only have 20 minutes left. The reasons are quite obvious, right? Is it my turn? Is it your turn? Yeah, your turn. All right. Yeah, I wanted to come to one little problem. Sorry, I know this is going to be a downer, but I want to raise awareness for one problem. We are seeing a lot of advertisement on social media that is not controlled at all. Now, imagine you're a presenter, you work for the in TV, you're a financial expert, you come home, scroll through Instagram, and you see yourself advertising crypto scams, but that's not you. That's a fake, an AI fake that was made using your image, making advertising for scams. Now, this is so painfully, obviously illegal. You should assume that this wouldn't even be uploaded. It would you would assume that it would be checked before it was uploaded using AI, but nothing is happening until the person affected becomes active, files a complaint with the police, asks them to take down the content, and it happens in the hundreds a day. It's posted so many times a day, and she has to do PR work to inform people that so that they don't fall for the scam. Because if you click on the scam website, you can actually phone with Anja Kohl, the presenter. It's all deepfaked, and we're expecting her to have this huge civil lawsuit, and one lawsuit wouldn't be enough. She would have to have several lawsuits just to take this scam advertisement down, and we can't place this responsibility on the individual. We can't have the individual be obliged to have a huge legislation in order to not be used for scams on social media. Yeah, that shouldn't happen. Now, let's also look at the users who have been viewing these ads all the time. They're all on Instagram with AI fakes. And if you as the user see and believe, wow, I've seen these advertisements, I just wanted a cheap bank account, of course, I assume that Instagram would take down scams. I can't believe it hasn't been taken down. Yeah, they should have a self-interest in that their users aren't scammed in large numbers, but apparently they haven't. And the legislator, the authorities are leaving us alone. We're alone, and it is threatening our democracy. All right, let's get to the solutions part. Where's the potato? Where's the potato? I can't see it. Yeah, It's here. All right. It has grown wings. Let's come to the solutions. We know what doesn't work. So let's do the top 5. Top 1, we need to enforce the actual laws that exist. And 2, we need protection by the state. The state is responsible for protecting our fundamental laws. Well, that sounds really bold, but yeah, the state should get active. Well, actually, I promised that we would sing on stage. It would be a lullaby. We could now use the recent song from Jan Böhmermann. Well, the police isn't hardly present on social media, and we just accept it. But actually, the state and the police have a responsibility for prevention as well as catching actual predators. So it's really obvious. We don't need to discuss this in detail. The state is not very innovative. So let's make proposals. We have a problem that the platform operators, and we shouldn't call them platform operators because that sounds so neutral. For them, it's cheaper to not stick with the law instead of upholding the law. And that's the reason is that the fines are so low. We talked about fines that aren't even raised, but yeah, when people are actually harmed and they go to court, like Renate Künast did, and she said that her credibility as a politician was undermined by having false votes attributed to her. And then she got 10,000 euros in damages. But still, there was no fundamental decision because it was an exceptional rule. And still, this content remained online. And in the US, there was a case where millions in damages had to be paid. And this is why platforms are more afraid of the US than the EU. If we would take this as seriously as copyright or patent right, then we wouldn't have a problem. There would be an incentive for people who would be able to make money with damages processes, and they would ensure that we would have more balance. Well, we don't have enough time for that, but we've written whole position papers on this. So Elon would have to pay at least as much as he makes from the social media bullshit. So yeah, it can be expensive, but think about it before you violate personal rights. And a third would be another thing from patent right. Now it's going to be a little more complicated. We would have to be much more courageous. We should treat the platforms as what they are. They have huge power. In Germany, only the state needs to uphold the constitution. The state has to protect and uphold our rights. This doesn't apply directly to companies. It's only in exceptional cases where they have to actually uphold human dignity and freedom of speech. But in special cases where a private person has such an important position that they're basically as powerful as a state, we should be able to bind them to the Constitution and make the Constitution binding for them. So that would mean that platforms such as X and Facebook, that with every decision they take, every choice they make on how to implement their algorithm, every influencing, always need to check whether they infringe on any rights, any constitutional rights, such as freedom of speech, or whether they interfere in elections. And they would only be able to use the tool if this caution has been taken, instead of having Elon dictate the law on what can and what can't be said on the platform, what is published, what is censored. Instead, I want him to adhere to our Constitution. Well, that's a very bold proposal, but it's not that mad. You see mad things and you think that can't be constitutional. Well, the technicality is platforms aren't directly mandated. They have to be mandated. But we need a different mindset. And the last point, if you count it, it's not 5 points. It's typical clickbait strategy. You need a bit of open-mindedness. We need to stop believing the narratives of the platforms, because the platforms say we are neutral. They are just a projection of reality. They are just a storage medium, and they are applying a principle from the year 2001, the provider privilege from the e-commerce guidelines, a time where, it provided that third parties are not liable for copyright infringements. There was a litigation because of child pornographic material, and then a privilege was established, and the platform platform providers said, "Oh, we have to have this too. We're so poor." And wherever you use the content and you redact it in any way, because on your timeline you also basically redact content. Of course, it's not your own content, but you curated it. You took the editing choice. And this is what platform providers have to be liable for.
The idea might sound bold because we're used to having done it differently for years, and because we have accepted their metrics and systems, we have we have just simply accepted that Meta should not be liable for another entity's content, another person's content, even if they make it their own. And that's the basic principle that is the issue. And I think we risk making the same mistake with AI. But at the very latest next year, we will look at this question again. Because with AI, you just don't even need third-party content, but just look at what kind of just slips out of the algorithm. You may notice that, sometimes it just starts insulting people. But let's stick with social media. We have no reason to provide social media, to give them any kind of privilege over other kinds of media. They are media companies, and they of course, can use the privileges and the privileged rights in terms of like media freedom, just like other media companies, but they also have to have the same responsibilities. Where they make decisions regarding what we see on their timelines, these 78% of far-right content is not something we need to accept. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, the basic law cannot be negotiable. So technically, this is where we would have our outro, but we told, so Anna said that she doesn't need to prepare a final question if we use up all the time, but so let's just summarize this whole story for everyone who just woke up. So first, regulation hasn't worked, even though regulation per se is the right way of going about it, but it hasn't worked well because it is a hot potato, even though the potato is not hot. We thought it was a hot potato, that we would endanger freedom of speech, but we didn't. That's what we've seen over the last 10 years. Freedom of speech is not under threat from the law, but from here, from the people who are actively using social media for their own, in the interest of their own political agenda or in the interest of whoever bought them, whether it's China, Russia, or crypto scammers. And that's the problem. What's happening there. So the freedom of speech is not under threat from enforcing our laws. And then we also noticed that the basic premises are wrong. The basic law is not simply a recommendation. If we think about, should we make the U.S. American institution the basis for our political communication, for our political arena, but aren't there maybe some things that are worth protecting and worth enforcing in the German basic law, specifically those things that differentiate us from the American Constitution, such as human right to dignity, the fact that a human individual cannot be made an object of government action. And if we want the basic law to remain relevant for the next decades, then we need to ask ourselves, what can we do to make sure of that? And this is a rationally solvable problem. For a change, it's not a problem, it just needs to be understood. It's a complex issue, so great that you've understood that and have listened to us for 60 minutes, because this is quite complicated. And I think out there are a couple of people who probably have good intentions and they're genuine Democrats, but they don't understand that this is a problem and don't understand that this is the solution. Even though the solution is so simple, the basic law cannot be negotiable. We simply have to dare, we have to be brave enough to enforce it, we have to be loud, we have to demonstrate that we are not scared of the government. Of course, we don't want it to control everything, but by now, we are way more scared of the platforms making us believe in a reality that doesn't exist and essentially fooling us without us noticing, and we need to defend ourselves against that by putting the responsibility putting responsibility and liability and obligations where it actually lies, and where we demand things from the platforms. Maybe yesterday was the best day to protect democracy through regulation of social media platforms, but today is the second best. Thank you.